Good morning. I am Yolawnda Henry, and I am the Chief Human Resources Officer for Alternatives Incorporated. I also serve on as the Diversity Chair for SHRM, which is Society for Human Resource Management. And I have been in Billings for about 12 years. And I think I will pass the torch to Karen and let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Karen Miller. I'm the Director of Strategic Advancement and Communications at St. John's United. I've been in Billings for 16 years, I think now. I'm excited to talk to you all today about some workforce solutions that we do.
I am Kelly Schallenberger, and I am the Senior Administrative Officer for St. John's United with Support Services. I have been in Billings for 16 years and with St. John's United for 16 years. And I'm also very excited to be here.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Thanks, Marcel and Big Sky EDA for making this happen. My name is Dan Carter. I do public and government affairs work for ExxonMobil. I've been in Billings, though, since the 80s, which is a long time. I've done some work in the private, public sector. I was an editor at the Gazette for a while, but then also worked as public affairs up at MSU Billings. So that's my context, and it's going to be good to have this conversation.
Yes. My name's Rachel Turley. I'm the Director of Operations at Turley Dental Care here in Billings. I've been in Billings, other than the 8 years that I moved to Bozeman to go to college, my entire life, so I'm really excited for this conversation. I think it's a lot of good stuff, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say too.
Thank you. So we're going to get started and just talk a little bit about what our organizations have learned throughout the pandemic. We know that there's been a lot of changes. There's been some work at home. There's been some people staying in the office the entire time. So let's talk a little bit about what we've learned about the pandemic and what has improved our workforce. And let's start with Rachel.
You know, I would say awareness more than anything. We were so spoiled for so long because us personally, we had a plethora of staff. We had more hygienists than we've ever had. We had more doctors than we'd ever had, and we kind of got spoiled with that. And now, as we've spoke about earlier, we're having to do the same amount of work with like half the staff. And so that has really, we're still dealing with that right now. We're trying to figure out, do we cut patient hours so that we're not overwhelming our staff? Do we work on efficiency, which you can do a little bit, but in healthcare it's hard. You can't do remote work in healthcare. You have to have boots on the ground to see patients and take care of people. So it's a lot different, we've found. And so we're still kind of navigating that and trying to figure out how to hire people who are inexperienced, because that is the workforce that's coming into our office. We're not getting experienced dental assistants, so we're having to train individuals that have no experience whatsoever, which takes 2, 3, 4 times as long to get somebody from knowing nothing to being proficient enough to at least do the bare minimum. And so that has added a lot to our process, I guess, but a lot of positives have come out of it as well. I think we've learned to communicate better as a team. I think our leadership has learned to communicate better, and then I think just the conversation and sort of the collaboration that comes out of being short-staffed, I think, is also really good.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And then Karen, tell us a little bit about childcare and what does that look like? I know you're a fairly new mom.
Yes, I'm a fairly new mom. So you want me to just talk about childcare, like taking care of a child, because it is a trip.
Well, that would be fun, but some of them might be like, oh. How about what does your organization do for childcare?
Yeah, I'm really proud that St. John's United has childcare on site. It's employer-provided childcare. We're one of only 2 in Yellowstone County. So Brett's RV is the other employer-provided childcare for our community. And we have about 72 kiddos that are being taken care of at the Center for Generations. It is employer-provided, but it is open to the community. In fact, it surprised me to learn that about 25% of the kids are staff, members of staff. The other 75% are actually community members. So yes, it's employer-provided, but it really does serve the community at large. I feel like Emily's presentation really gives a lot of evidence as to why childcare is so important. She said the largest demographic that was impacted by COVID were college-educated moms, right? Because childcare went out of business. We couldn't have kids in childcare. And then you had your parents watching them today. What if your parents were sick? And then there goes your childcare, and then how do you show up for work? Dan Carter always talks really beautifully about, parents tend to make it work. They find a neighbor, they find their parents, they figure it out, and employers oftentimes don't even know what they had to do to get to work on time. Well, St. John's United, our mission is to provide living opportunities within nurturing environments of hope, dignity, and love. And we thought, what brings more hope, dignity, and love to our residents than funny little kids that run around and say whatever they want and make loud noises and laugh and giggle, and my child is now roaring. That is our latest development. And so it works with our mission to have childcare for our residents, but really it is an employee attraction and even more so retention tool. And the fact that it's on site and that our employees actually work and know the people that are taking care of their kids, it makes parents feel so much more assured that their kids are in a loving environment. So I think childcare opened up, Center for Generations opened up when, Kelly?
A little over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
They've been doing it a long time.
Yeah, so it's not just a new thing, it's not just the hot thing to do in workforce development. St. John's knew that it was important, but even more so after the pandemic, that really showed just how valuable having childcare is. And then what I would say is, if you can't do childcare, because it is expensive, we look at the numbers and we burn anywhere from $125,000 to $250,000 a year. That's how much it costs us to have childcare. So it is not a money-making business right now. But if you can look to partner and figure that out, it really is a valuable asset for you to attract and retain your talent.
Kelly, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just agree, kind of a little bit about my story when I came here 16 years ago. I had a 10-month-old, and that was my attraction. I took a pay cut to go to St. John's, but it was because I could bring my child there. And in human resources, which is something that I do, I see that a lot from working moms who want that peace of mind. And if you ask anybody about Center for Generations, we're an excellent daycare. And it's peace of mind, it's the ability to be able to come to work and go see your child whenever you want, have your child running around, obviously pre-COVID, and it's a great resource that we use for talent attraction.
Almost sounds like the best of both worlds. You have the kids there, and then you can have the grandparents there. You can just work there, and everybody will be there.
And everybody's happy.
Right.
Do you have a hard time filling the positions in your daycare?
Currently, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're transitioning to that problem solving, but we're working on a solution for that. Do you want me to talk about that?
Sure.
Okay. So yes, and Kelly can talk more to that as she oversees HR, but yeah, and the reason is because the pay in childcare is really low. And so how are you going to survive on $11 an hour? And we saw all the wage increases. Well, childcare hasn't seen those wage increases in their industry. And we don't treat childcare as a profession. We don't treat childcare providers and teachers as professionals historically. And so there have to be a lot of shifts from that, from a systemic point of view. And so what we talked, Kelly and I and teams, is how do we rebuild this model? And so we've recently partnered with 0 to 5 Montana. They're a not-for-profit that looks at childcare solutions. And we're actually talking with 2 external business partners about, hey, would you join us and build a membership? And so would you pay to become a member of the Center for Generations at St. John's United? You don't have to build the brick and mortar space, which we know is really expensive. You don't have to manage their operation, which is also very expensive and time consuming. But you would pay a membership fee, and then you would have priority on our list for your employees being able to have your kids at the Center for Generations. And then that membership fee that they provide would go to increase wages for our childcare providers. So that's what we're looking to do, because that's the kind of the first hole we have to plug, is increasing wages so that we can sustain that workforce for childcare, so that we can increase capacity for more kids to be taken care of these business partners. So it's kind of like a co-op model, but rather than the parents owning those shares, it's these other business partners owning these shares. And it's pretty cool. So cross your fingers for us that it works out. Because if this model works out, then the intention, right, is then to build these other little partnerships for childcare across our county and then across our state.
And that becomes their talent attraction as well.
Okay, and we know childcare is huge. And Dan, so tell us a little bit about what you've seen in recruiting, because you do nationwide recruiting. I mean, you
Sure.
don't have to, you're not as confined as some of us
Yeah.
are with some of the positions. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, there's a couple of different things at play here. One of the things I want to touch on with Rachel is that, excuse me, last couple of years, though, we've seen a lot of people call it a couple of different things, like the Great Resignation and the, whatever you want to call it, the Great something or other. To me, it's almost like the Great Reassessment. And so companies and workers are reassessing how they want to do certain things, right? And this is an opportunity for, I think, a lot of people to not go back to 2019, but to take this as ground zero and go forward, right? So on the larger scale, ExxonMobil was like a lot of oil and gas companies that lost demand in the pandemic because, and Billy can tell, people weren't flying anywhere, transportation was way down. But what happened is, and on a national scale, that was really true, right? So our industry saw a lot of fluctuation. We actually lost workforce, and now we're starting to build it back up because we realized that people went to other companies, and so we're reassessing how we want to be when, going forward, because we're working in a dual challenge environment right now where we need to provide the gas, diesel, asphalt that people want and need to move forward, but we're also, the other part of the challenge is getting to a net zero emission goal by 2050. And so we have to manage both of those at the same time. But what's interesting is that locally and regionally, I just read the other day, KOA, our friends at KOA, they had a 33% revenue increase over the last year. They had record numbers. And why? People bought RVs and campers, and they're driving around. Well, guess, they don't just parachute in on angel dust and magic. They have to drive, to fuel their pickup trucks and things like that to get there. So demand for our fuel regionally has remained pretty steady. We just lost a few workers, so we're building it back up. The challenge is figuring out, okay, how do we want to appeal to those workers? And a part of it is what Karen's talking about, is where you're at, you have to figure out the local collaboration that you need to make a difference so they'll want to come to work for you, no matter what it is. And to get to, I'm going to jump ahead because Brittany asked in the last session about what people are doing to mentor. I think the key is mentorship to keep high school kids here. So there are a lot of businesses in our community who can, for lack of a better term, step up and help somebody who's already in the workforce. One of these kids, I don't know how many, 1,500 or I don't know how many high school students are working in Albertsons and Wendy's and all that kind of stuff. Help them understand what their next step is. And if we can't do that, we only have ourselves to blame if they're deciding to leave, right? And I think we need to do a better job, and we're reassessing that with the different programs to bring people not only back in from a recruiting standpoint, but keeping them here. And so that's understanding what we need to do from a diversity and inclusiveness perspective, how that looks like, what that means when you've got a multicultural workforce that's here. How do you adjust on the ground when you've got people who are saying like, I need to be gone for Ramadan, I need to be doing these sort of things. It's like, all right, we need to understand what that means to us and to our business, and so we can continue to be successful. So that's kind of a meandering sort of an answer to your question.
No,
But I think it has to hit on all kinds of different levels, because the notion that here's my secret sauce is not your secret sauce.
I agree. I think we have to be able to pivot, and the things you used to do don't always work now.
Right.
So let me ask this. We see a lot and we hear a lot about flexibility. Tell me a little bit about what flexibility would look like in your organization. Because, like Rachel said, it's healthcare. Sometimes you can't cut corners. And when we talk about flexibility, for some that might mean I want to work 3 to 7, or I might want to work, 12 to 2. And so how are we adjusting to what that looks like? Because I need to have time to make my TikToks. So,
You and me both.
right?
Yes.
So, but talk a little bit about that.
So flexibility for us has been difficult because one thing that our organization does that's kind of out of the box in terms of dental facilities is that we are open Monday through Friday, 7 to 7, and Saturday, 8 to 5. The majority of dental practices are open 9 to 3, Monday through Wednesday, and maybe a half day on Thursday or half day on Friday. So that in and of itself, right now, is not attractive to people. What I have found that used to motivate people is money, and I feel like now it's time. And so it's figuring out how to create that, but still stay within our business model, because honestly, our model is to care for people and to create a happier and a healthier community. And doing that means we have these extended hours so people aren't having to leave work to come to a dental appointment, because they're not going to come, they're not going to show up. Statistically speaking, patients are more likely to show up in that 7 to 9 o'clock time, or that 5 to 7 o'clock time, so they're not having to take their kiddos out of school, they're not having to leave work. And so we're trying to figure out how we can, have somebody that wants to work 9 to 3 or whatever. We're trying to reassess how we can do that, but we can still stay within our vision and mission as an organization to care for people. And so that's really where we're kind of reassessing. But right now we're offering different shifts. So people that need to take their kiddos to daycare, we're allowing them to come in 30 minutes to an hour later, and they can leave 30 minutes early so they can go pick their kiddos up. But we only have so many spots for that before it is not benefiting our patients anymore. And so with flexibility, I feel like you also have to have it grounded with accountability. So you can't just give, and then all of a sudden your business model takes a tank because of it. So we are trying to be flexible with people, but we also then have to say, I expect this from you as well. So you can't work 3 days a week, but you can work 5 days a week if you can work those hours. Does that work for you? And then we're still having to have people work on Saturdays, and I think that really butts heads with time. And that's another hard thing that we're dealing with too. But again, we don't work for ourselves, we work for our patients. And so I think educating your staff on your model and your vision and your mission is a really important piece of bringing employees into your organization. I think if they understand that, there's less pushback if they really know why they're working for you. And you get to see the patient's face, teeth, mouth, smile. At the end of it, it's easier to believe in, I think so.
Yeah, I think if you have if you hire on to work in construction, you're going to be working outside and doing certain things, and you're expected to show up. We have about 300 people that work at the refinery, half of which are shift workers. So when it's time to report to their shift, and we're a 24/7, 365, so they're, changing their shifts a lot of times. So you report to your shift, or you report to your shift. That said, we have flexibility built into our working arrangements, contracts, all that other sort of stuff that lets people take advantage. Hey, talk to your supervisor, I need to do this, when we can make it work. And so it's a dual, responsibility upon the employers and the employees. And if that dynamic is well in balance, I think you're pretty well served. You know what I mean?
It's been interesting for me just because I've been in human resources at St. John's for the last 16 years, and so I've done a little bit of every one of the positions, and employment was one of them. And back in 2008, 2009, we had these shifts open, and this is what you hired for, and if you couldn't work these shifts, we moved on, and we had 4 positions open, and the job was pretty nice to have. At this point, we've decided that we are really flexible, and so, we're the 24/7, 365. So there is a lot of flexibility, but now we advertise as build your own shift. And basically what that means is, whatever you can work, you get to visit with your supervisor and our scheduler, and we just see if we can make that work. And so we've just come full circle as far as our way of thinking of how to fill positions and what flexibility looks like. We've always kind of been flexible to people who are going to school. You could work just weekends, or you could work evenings, and we would work around your school schedule, your other job, those kinds of things. And now we just will, we're flexible to anything and everything that you can come up with, come and let's talk about it. So it's really just opened up a conversation about what works for your life, and we're willing to work around that.
I have a question about the intersection of flexibility and accountability, because, and what you're talking about, King West is where I work, and we're very flexible also, and it's almost, we don't take it, build your own ship, but it's becoming that. Our leadership doesn't want to do things like Big Brother, like watching when they log in, or keystrokes, or they don't want to do that because they want it to be a trusting environment, which I love. But then when we talk about flexibility and just the reassessment and the evolution, how do you guys feel about the trust and the accountability? And then inevitably there may be 1% that take advantage, but is Big Brother not the way to go? Where's the accountability, or is it just trust?
I think that's communication. So that all goes back to what your expectations are. So in our company, for example, Friday, March 13th, 20, whatever it was, showed up, and I got a call and said, okay, so from Houston, my boss is in Houston, he said, okay, if you can work from home, go ahead and work from home. At that point, he didn't call every day and say like, hey, what are you doing today? What's your schedule like? We had regular conversations about what my expected deliverables were. And there were days where I'm like, oh man, I got to get up because so I've got 2 daughters here in Billings and 5 grandkids, and periodically they needed help on something. So, and my daughters were, one of them who works for First Interstate Bank, she had to continue to do her job. The other one, like, I need help with homework. Can you help, right? So I logged off and got in and helped them with their homework for a little bit, got back on, and so they didn't care if I had an hour or 2 off in the middle of the day, if I made my, whatever, my Zoom meetings, and if I had to work until 7 o'clock at night to get my stuff done. It's just a matter of the ebb and flow of what needed to be done, the conversations you had, because you're held accountable for the end result, not necessarily for the time you spent getting that result. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's a communication thing. I think if people aren't clear, they need to ask their supervisors or their employees, and on the end of it, if the employers, the HR departments of the world aren't clear that they're being understood, they need to ask, because I think there's too many assumptions, and then that leads to, bitterness, like, well, you didn't tell me that I had to watch Yolawnda's TikTok because it was cool, which, but you know what I mean? Those things have to be communicated, and I think that's where a lot of the breakdown happens, and then that leads to, people not understanding exactly what they need to do next and how they get out of that gully and the whole bit.
Yeah, I think setting clear expectations is super important. We don't really have remote work where I'm at. I do some remote work, but I think it's just understanding what needs to be done. And here's the start line, here's the finish line. I don't really care how you get to the finish line, but you need to get to the finish line. I think everybody works differently. I know my dad is part of the baby boomer generation. And me coming in at managing the organization now, I do things a lot more efficiently, for lack of a better word, just because we went to school and we had the technology at our fingertips. And so now I'm having to reteach him how to be efficient because he hasn't been doing it the easiest way. And so we're teaching each other, but the time it takes him to do a task versus what I'm doing is not the same, because the efficiency there and everything else is very different. So I think everybody completes their tasks differently. I think it just needs to be completed.
And I think too, a lot with the trust is you see it in your productivity, depending on what the job is. We actually had our graphics designer move from Billings to Oregon, and we didn't want to lose her. And this was back in like 2018, 2019, prior to this. And so this was not a fully remote position, and it turned into one because she can really work I mean, she does everything on the computer. She doesn't have to clock in. There are apps out there that we use with her. So she clocks in on a time clock, and there's an app that she just, she's a graphics person, so she does different jobs for different people. And so she just fills out a time report. There's a really quick app that she gets on, and she sends us a time report. And then she also, it coincides with her time clock. But we don't ever have to question that. And so she was a trusted employee prior, and so we felt really good about allowing her to go remote. But something that St. John's saw was, you know, things that I would have never thought were going to be remote ever in my career, they became remote. And so it is really a trust thing. If you're an exempt salary employee, I think that comes with trust. And, you know, it's how you get to the end. I like what you said exactly. It doesn't matter as long as you get there. So you measure their productivity, and if you're not seeing that gives you a conversation to have with your employee.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say, you know, with a certain level of, you have all been talking about accountability and flexibility. We are all talking that we all have trusted employees, and that everybody's gonna do what they're supposed to do if we set clear expectations. And the reality of it is, that's not every employee that works with us. And so there still has to be that level of accountability. You have all talked about setting clear expectations, making sure that they understand what the end result is. But as leaders, I think we still have to hold them accountable to those. Otherwise, things can get sideways really quickly. So yes, of course we want to trust all our employees, but we also have to understand that not every employee maybe is like us. And so there is a level of accountability that you still have to do after you've set those clear expectations and seen what the work looks like.
And I think one of the, not easiest, but most impactful ways your supervisors, leaders can set that accountability is by doing it themselves. I'm sure we've all worked for leaders that are like, oh, we've got work-life balance. You're like, well, you don't, right? So that's not really what's going on here. And so how are we communicative? How are we accountable? How do we make sure that we're getting the work done if we're working remotely? Right, we really have to mimic that. We have to show that so that's mimicked with our team. And I think sometimes we forget that often if you give somebody trust, they really want to be trustworthy. For the most part, humans, right? Trust begets trust. And so I love St. John's that say, hey, build your own shift, because right there, people come in, they're like, well, that's sweet, right? Like I get to build my own shift, and I have childcare, and it's like, they're going to take care of me, and so usually they'll want to show up. They'll want to be trustworthy. So you know, it's those human components that we sometimes forget are so powerful.
Yeah, and I work for a company that, you know, is built on, you know, 97-page PowerPoints and 14-point solutions and all this kind of stuff. But when you boil it right down, I like it, it's kind of the rule of threes, right? And it's what Karen was talking about. You model the behavior you want to see in others. You connect in the way that is valuable to both you and them, and then you care, right? And if you have those three things, they'll all wind up. So, you know, model, connect, and care. And when you really care about someone, if they're not making it, that's a hard conversation. Like, I care about what you're doing, but this may not be the right fit for you. So how do we get you to something that is the right fit, right? So that caring doesn't mean like, oh, right? Businesses are in business to keep the lights on and make some money and make people go, right? And it's true for large companies and small ones. And you need to have the right people in the right spot. And caring means having hard conversations at times to get them to where they really want to be, or where you think they can be to really be successful. And you're not doing anybody any favors by just letting it go sometimes.
Accountability, I think, is a big piece of that I think is hard, but I also think we have a lot of entry-level positions, and I think a lot of young people or people that are coming into the industry for the first time, they don't even know what their own capacity is. And so if you can be that for people too, I think that if you can grow your own employees from the ground up, that also creates a really sultry culture, I feel like. If you're willing to put the time, effort, and energy into individuals that are coming in with zero experience, I think that also builds trust. I mean, if I can sit down with somebody and say, you're not doing a good job with this, this, and this, but I'm gonna sit down and show you how to do it. I know you can do it, and let's help you be successful, because in turn, we're successful with that. So I agree, putting people in the right places.
Working at job service, we have many conversations with people, and during COVID, it's interesting because quality of life, you know, with everything taking place, people were scared, and so quality of life was huge for people. And so we have found, you know, how can employers play to that? You know, how can they get creative? And we have found that people no longer want to have the corporate mentality, you know, work like a dog, give up your vacation days. You know, they're actually preferring to work for smaller businesses that allow them to build their own schedule, you know, help out with, you know, childcare or whatever it may be. So it's very interesting how, as an employer, if you can think, how can you play to the quality of life for your employees, how much that could benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset change. You know, you're used to the Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and unfortunately that just doesn't exist. Where some of us struggle, though, is we do have operations that are 24 hours or have extended hours, and so you can't very well say, okay, we're going home, you guys stay here and behave until we come back tomorrow at 9 o'clock, you know, and so you have different dynamics going on. But again, I think it's just the whole mindset change, and it has to happen with the employees and the employers, because we have to be willing to step outside of the box of our comfort level. And how hard is that, you know? And again, I do think that genuinely people want to come to work and do a good job. I mean, and just like HR, we kind of get a bad rep. And it's like, you know, you think I lay home at night and say, who can I piss off tomorrow? That is not what happens, people. So I think just having that trust and changing the whole mindset will be helpful for organizations.
One thing that comes to mind just real quickly is that old movie with Dolly Parton working 9 to 5. You know, how they allow the women to do the job sharing. One woman comes in from 8 to noon, the other one, you know, comes in from 12 to 5, or, you know, being flexible like that. If you can't provide childcare, allow, you know, take 2 part-time positions and make 1 full-time. How can we get creative with, you know, employers and allowing, you know, people to come to work if they have children, you know? Mothers can work that out with, you know, whomever, family. Well, I have to take my children to school in the morning, but I'm able to pick them up after work.
I definitely
think the predictive scheduling is coming up a lot, especially in the retail world, is that people would find out on Sunday their next 2 weeks scheduled. So there's a lot of larger conversations about having a schedule out 3 weeks before, letting people build that life, not necessarily for the flexibility, but so that they can make their own outside stuff. So I see a lot of that conversation going on with big companies, and I think that's really smart.
I think trying to get the schedule out, like we try and put our schedule out like 8 to 10 weeks in advance for lots of reasons. Obviously, patients want to see certain providers, so we need to provide them with that schedule, but also so people can, instead of us planning around their life, they're able to completely plan their vacation schedule around their work schedule. We only work 3 days a week, typically, if people want to do 12-hour shifts. So they're really able to not even have to take vacation and have 7 days off in between their shifts. We really mimic the hospital setting in that sense, because then we can do our extended hours and all of that. But the issue with that, as we've been talking about, is that people are wanting to work different shifts. So the things that motivate people, like having full-time benefits and having all of these things, well, do you provide benefits to part-time staff, and what does that look like? That's really the thing that's the question now is, okay, well, you want to work part-time, but then that excludes you from having healthcare benefits and pension match and dental benefits, because what makes it so that it's valuable to work full-time if you give your benefits to every single employee? That's really where the conversation is of, you can work part-time, but that excludes you from every benefit. But we have staff that choose to work 3 or 4 part-time jobs so they don't have to work Saturday, or they don't have to work an extended hour. And how do you compete with that? I mean, you just really have to figure out what it is that motivates people. And I keep coming back to, in my mind, it's time, it's not money. So figuring out how to make time a benefit and not,
Well, I think sometimes you just have to ask employees, like, what is it that, you know,
What
is
motivates
interesting?
you?
Yeah, what motivates you? I saw Kim had a question.
I had more of a comment, and just wanted to share a philosophy. I work for United Way, but what is also an important component, I think, that sometimes employers miss is that opportunity to have that intersection of where the employer's corporate social responsibility is and where that opportunity for the company or employees to feel like they're contributing to the community as a whole, taking on that philanthropic mindset. And when you do provide those interactive opportunities to do something bigger than just your own corporate day-to-day, collect your paycheck and come home, which is really the reward for working. But when you have that other component, I think that adds also tremendously to the quality of life. Maybe not for every employee, but for some, that's a determining factor when they're looking at recruitment opportunities. What does the employer do for the community and how can they be involved in something bigger? And oftentimes that's also a motivating piece. So I just wanted to toss that out.
Well, I do think, as you mentioned, it really it depends on what the employee, what does the employee value and or employer. For instance, I had someone that called me the other day, and they were one of the few people that weren't they were self-employed, but they had some medical issues come up. So they asked me, well, where can I work part-time and still get those benefits? So I had to rack my brain and come up with a list for them of places that they can work part-time and still get those benefits. So at the end of the day, it is based on, you know, what everybody's values.
Absolutely. Okay. And I think we talked about flexibility because that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. But what other incentives are floating around that you guys are doing that we can share?
This might sound really corny, but I think sometimes we forget that if your place of work is fun and you have really strong relationships there, you actually want to be there, right? You want to show up for work. And so Gallup has an employee engagement survey, and one of the questions they ask on there that I love, that I sometimes think freaks some employers out is, do you have a best friend at work? Not a friend, a best friend at work. People are like, no, you can't be that close, right? But think about it, if you work with your best friend, think about how much more you want to show up for work, and you don't want to leave that place. You don't want to leave your homie. And so I think sometimes we forget of that impact of relationships. And at St. John's, we have fun.
It's a lot of fun.
We have so much fun, and Kelly does such a phenomenal job with the engagement team because we did Mario Kart racing this summer where we dress up as Mario Kart characters.
Karen brings that up because she won.
I mean, I did win. I was Toadstool, and I did win. But we had our CEO out there as Mario. We built carts. We raced around. The residents came out and laughed and cheered us on and bet on different racers. The kids came out. My little girl was in a toad hat. You know, I mean, and did that do any productivity? No, we all took an hour and a half, probably a little bit longer, to decorate our carts, right? And there was no bottom line to that. But it was fun, and we were all like, we laughed, we walked a little bit higher. I mean, that just gave us a little bit of a boost. And so if you can just remember to have fun, and I have no idea how you create fun, but just think about how do you play? Don't forget, at the end of the day, we still like to play as adults. And so how can we play at work too, to keep that engagement up?
I think I want to be director of fun now.
Yes.
Okay, you can do it.
Come join us. Yes. For St. John's, we've done several different things for incentives. One is our nurse apprenticeship program, which is huge for us. It not only builds a pipeline for healthcare workers, but it benefits St. John's. So CNAs or LPNs, PCAs, they can come work at St. John's and earn up to $6 an hour towards scholarship credits. And so when they're going to school, the more they work, the more money they earn that pays for their school. They could literally pay for school while they work at St. John's, and then when they're done and they're a nurse, they can go anywhere they want. We hope they fall in love with us and stay, but it's okay if they don't. But we have that. We've opened up an employee health clinic. And so if you need things like same-day care, services, acute care, you want to use them as a primary care provider, you could just go right down the hall and see your doctor. We have a pharmacy within St. John's that we discount. Our employees can get their prescriptions at a discount. They're on our health insurance. We provide formulary generics free of charge. We have a gym, which pre-COVID everybody could use. It's going to open up again, but our independent living has a swimming pool. You can do laps. We've got a full gym, and you could take yourself and a friend there free of charge as well. I mean, we have a lot of incentives on top of childcare, on top of intergenerational programs, on top of volunteering.
Pet insurance.
We have pet insurance. Yes.
I
So
think pet insurance is huge right now. People
yes,
are all over
yes,
it.
and we offer part-time benefits to anybody 24 plus. It has access to our benefits and paid time off and things like that. So.
What kind of ideas do you have for like smaller mom and pop stores? Like we're less than 10 employees, and over half of them have children under the age of 5. But we obviously can't provide daycare. We obviously can't do a gym or anything like that. But
Partner.
Yeah. You can provide discounts for daycare. You can provide, if you call around to like businesses around town, you can partner with, Granite and the YMCA and places like that. They'll give you discounts for being a corporate member. You can incentivize like gift cards, take them out for dinner, like small intimate groups like that. I would have some kind of recognition if they've been with you for a long time. Those are just some of, but you can give those incentives, you just do it differently.
And I think, one of the things too is that from my perspective, well, we can't have go-kart races because we're in a manufacturing site and we have a lot of heat and pressure. I mean, there's a lot of issues that could happen if we're not behaving.
But
which
you
would
have
happen.
fun.
Yeah. But I think for us, a lot of the things that are more successful in establishing a culture are real organic. So the employees get to decide like, hey, what is it that we think we ought to do? And they'll be like, oh, I know what we can do. Let's do a Bobcat Grizzly sort of a thing, right? And so even if you got like 4 or 5 people, I work for an engineering company, so there's like 90% Bobcat fans, which I think is awful. Who said that? Okay, yeah, whatever. Good job. Yeah, we love you. Yeah. So anyway, so that kind of stuff. But one of the things that was really fun, a group of us sat around and we're like, it's nice outside during the summer. Let's have a cornhole tournament. So we put a thing out like, register who you want to be on your team for a cornhole tournament. It's going to be Friday and we left it from 10:30 till 2. So depending on your work schedule, you could come and play anybody. And we just, paired people up, and the winners bracket moved ahead. And we got these little corny trophies, and it took less than $100 to do it, and it was fun. And I barbecued hamburgers, and other people brought stuff, right? So in a way, that's kind of a small mom and pop feel to a larger company, and I think it pays dividends. And we have people that work in the refinery that the guys will hunt together when they have shared time off. They'll go out and fish and do all these other things. But we've adopted a way that we've had, and Erica's been a part of this, we've adopted a trail in the Beartooths, and every summer we go up and do trail maintenance. And we put it out to people and their employees and their families, and we'll go up and we relocated about 1,000 feet of trail last summer, and it was work, but it sure was fun. We got to know each other. You talk about, I didn't know you had, a dog or whatever. So.
And I think too, like as far as if you're talking about how to incentivize people with like childcare, because childcare is so expensive. One thing that we do, not with childcare, but like with continuing education, is we offer we'll pay up to X amount at this percentage per course, and that incentivizes people to continue their education. So that's something you could say too, like we'll pay a percentage or a dollar amount of your child care, if that's something that you can work into your books, especially with the size of your organization. Maybe you could allocate X amount of dollars towards child care, and if that's something that your employees are interested in, you could say, okay, well, we could offer X percent of this for child care.
What kind of business do you have?
I'm in the RV business.
What's that?
I'm in the RV business.
There you go.
RV.
But I mean, could you partner with some other small businesses to come together and say, hey, what's the benefit we need? And could you provide that as a co-op? Could you provide that as a cooperative together?
Well, based on, we just had a survey because we're getting ready to do annual reviews and everything, and basically everybody, because like I said, half our employees have new babies basically, and childcare was a huge one. So we're just trying to come up with new ways to, you know, help out these people that need this childcare and, you know, can't necessarily afford it all the time. So one of our employees, his mom watches his daughter every single day. She's sick, then, you know, his wife's gotta take the day off, or he's gotta take the day off, and then, you know, getting her back and forth to preschool too, so it, you know, just trying to help accommodate him as best as we can, because we know, you know, his family life is a little bit more difficult than some, and, but then also making sure, you know, helping him be efficient at work still, you know, we still need you to show up and work on these RVs and be efficient, so you can help with bonus, so you can make more money.
Right.
You know, so, trying to find that line to help, because, you know, we love our employees, and like I said, we're a very small group, so we work really hard to maintain them, but, you know, at the same time, we still have RVs that need to be fixed for having to turn away work because it's outrageous.
And your customers have expectations.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. This is a good time of the year for us because everything we have is not quite so high demand, but, you know, May to August are huge times of the year, and, you know, there's no school, so making sure you have childcare beyond school hours and stuff is difficult, so.
And what you have to pay an employee to afford just bare minimum daycare is crazy.
Right.
I mean, what, $15 to $20 an hour just to pay for daycare?
Then they
It makes
have
it
to
worth
get in
working.
line to see if they can find it.
That's
Yeah.
I would reach out to 0 to 5 Montana. They're really great, just to help you think and innovate around that. Because that's what they're doing across the state right now, is doing these little pilot programs to see how can we reinvent and rework childcare so that small businesses can afford it and have access to it for their employees.
And if it's a money thing too for your employees, you know, having the resources available for them on how to apply for help financially. You know, there's daycare help out there that they can apply for. Just being able to be that provider of a resource, saying, if you need this, this is where you go, because not a lot of people know how to do that. And just having those things available for them to reach out will help your business.
I think we had a question. Okay.
Two things. One, I'm a small mom and pop shop too, I'm manufacturing. And we have about, almost 8 employees now. And so we're still in that piece trying to figure out what really makes them tick. And for us, we were gonna do this nice holiday party that we were gonna take them out for a nice dinner, you know, Ruby Chop, Buffalo Block, something like that. They wanted to go bowling. And we had the best time. So it really is about finding what that employee wants. And my husband and I thought, we're gonna go bowling, this is gonna be a fiasco, which was the best time ever. And it created us realizing that we need to do that more, that our employees needed to see us in that work-life balance so that we weren't, they see us stressed, trying to make sure that everything gets done and that type of thing. So being able to pull that back was really, really good. And second thing is, as to that partnership, that's one of the things that, because I have 2 employees right now that have young little ones, and one on the way, and so they're trying to navigate that. So having that resource of, here's where you need to go. You know, there's a lot of great programs for young families in Montana. We just need to be able to find that resource and be able to provide it back. And I think that's a really big piece from my perspective.
And I would say just on the 0 to 5, we have handouts back here, but they're in town next Tuesday. So at Shields at 2 o'clock, if you're interested in hearing more about what Karen's mentioned it a few times, what is 0 to 5, what's our mission, what do they do? They'll be at Shields with us to do a little like learning, it's not lunch and learn, but they'll be there to present on who they are and then how we can get connected with them. So if you're interested in that, we'd love for you to do it.
What time is that?
2 o'clock, and there's a flyer.
The one thing that might work for you smaller people is like, and some of our people do it, because I have quite a few small businesses that have, 10 to 17 employees, is if you can find a couple parents that trust each other to watch their kids, which is tough, but if you can, switch them to 410s And then they can have a day off and do that. And if you had 5 people, it'd be a perfect world, but not all 5 probably trust someone to babysit their kid. But, you know, when you're trying to do what you can do, but that's one thing that's helped, is allowing a couple employees to share. And the other one is to your thought of bowling. So I found out a long time ago, when we have events for our people, like we take them to a dinner or we'll take them to an event, but not everybody likes to lose their personal time. So when you go bowling on a Friday night, half of them don't want to go bowling, or a percentage, because it's their personal time. And so what we did is we just said, okay, on Friday at 3 we're closed, and we go do our thing for a couple hours during work time, and we pay them. And then and if it goes an hour later, they all want to stay anyway. And so you got to change it up. We barbecue it one Friday a month, and you got to do all kinds of stuff to keep that crew there. But the retention is very strong when we do that.
We do fun Fridays, so like I bring in donuts or bagels or something like that on Friday mornings. And I came from the corporate world. I was in HR for like 20 years because I started when I was 12. So
I feel you.
I knew all that corporate stuff that you have to do this, and you have to do this. Well, when you're a small mom and pop shop, you have a lot of opportunity to not have to do this and not have to do that. And it's just about finding those pieces that really work within your organization. Because what works for my small mom and pop shop may not work for yours. So, and I do have the opportunity to be flexible, but I have enough staff to cover a machine running when someone's not there. So it still brings a lot of anxiety and stress to us, because as the owners, we're worried not only about our livelihood, but about all of theirs. And I think that goes back to that care piece, is my employees know I care about them, because I ask every morning. So I think that's really important piece from our perspective. So.
Yeah.
Totally. That's good, thank you.
I wanted to play to that real quick too. Some conversations we've had with employers is, they're so busy on trying to attract the, great employees from the outside. And so they're offering these grandiose packages, vacation to Disney, whatever it may be. And then they're forgetting about the current employee who has been with them for 20 years. So just something to keep in mind when you are trying to attract that new talent. Don't forget about the people that have been with you for 20 years and award them accordingly. So.
I agree. I mean, that's one of the things that is easy to be forgotten, having those conversations where you're just telling people thank you, right? Especially, how many people here know somebody who worked, didn't stop working during the pandemic, right? We all know somebody. Healthcare, convenience store worker, the person moving the oranges at Albertsons, people handing the food at the drive-through window. And they were in a lot of problems. As you talk to kids who were doing those jobs, or teenagers, they're like, I'm tired of getting yelled at by people who are impatient, right? The adults were the ones like, can't you go any faster? Because I ordered my, double burger, whatever. And the kid's like, we're going as fast as we can, and we're losing people because someone's sick, and don't you realize, it doesn't matter, right? And then so providing, and you've said this before, one of your keywords we've talked about before is grace, right? And you have a little bit of grace for everybody around you. Work here in this community, but also live here. And if you understand what those connections are and why they're important, whether it's finding daycare, someone to help, like, hey, who's the person I get a hold of when my garbage disposal broke, or, I needed a handyman or whatever. Things like Nextdoor app and Facebook groups and all these other things took the place of, the phone trees and all that sort of thing. And that's actually been kind of beneficial, I think, because it helped show that community together. And if you can build off of that within your day-to-day work world in the community as we all go forward to become more successful, and it's not going to be overnight, but it will come over time. And I think all that stuff works together to really help get us there.
I agree. She had a question.
I'm sorry, I'm making one more comment.
That's okay.
Earlier you had made the comment about high school students and showing them the opportunities that are out there and kind of giving them that oomph, I guess, are in my mind, when they're making those decisions.
Yep.
And starting to think about it. Now, that doesn't mean we bring them into an employer and put them to work 9 to 5, but we need to find.
Wait, could we?
Stop.
So
I have a high school student that is he's finishing his senior year. He is going to school in the fall for manufacturing, CNC programming and machine tool services, or machine tool. He has been with us since he was a freshman going into, or since the summer before he went into his freshman year of high school. So he, like, literally, he took out the trash, he helped put hardware kits together, he did menial tasks. I mean, I didn't make him clean toilets, I promise. But he did those types of things. We paid him $11 an hour. He is currently working through the Career Center for us to get his education, his high school diploma. So he gets there about 1:15 every afternoon. But he's been with us for 4 years. And I have been grooming him to someday take over our business.
So thank you for teeing up that softball, because, and Karen and Marcel know what I'm going to be talking about. A number of years ago, we started a program called STEM Yellowstone. And it's science, technology, engineering, math program. And then Liz has been there involved with it since day one. Marcel's been involved. Karen's been involved. We're trying to get Rachel to be involved, but she's dragging her feet. And what it is, it's a program where we put together immersive experiences on Saturdays for kids between the grades 3 through 7. And the rationale is that we get together, so they're focused on, we've done a medical day, an engineering day, environmental science day, we've done something on geology, and the idea is that you have businesses with expertise in some of these fields, and they're leading a group of kids on a project or an experiment for about 40 minutes. And what they do is they'll dive into a coding experiment. And what did you work on this one? It was a Lego
I am
thing.
not a coder, but we coded our way out of a Lego maze.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I'm so glad that I was a bartender, because talking to second graders and drunk people is pretty much the same thing. So it worked well for me.
And so what we do is we've done that thing over the last couple of years, and during COVID it kind of stopped, but we're going to reinvigorate it again. But the idea is that when you get 3rd and 4th and 5th graders that learn something really cool and then go back and tell their friends and their parents and their teachers about it, the idea is that they force the teachers to ask them questions like, well, tell me more. What did you learn? How did that work? Because we've got to break this whole notion that you're making this progression, and then by the time you're a junior in high school, the clouds open up like, oh, you're going to be a engineer, or you're going to be somebody who works in the trucking industry, or you're going to be, a mechanic or whatever, right? It just doesn't work that way. They need to have that exposure, and what they learned at that sort of a thing is some really nice person named Karen helped me break through this thing. And that stuff, right, Liz? And then you translate that to a workforce opportunity, what it means to the workforce. Here's somebody that you can actually become a mentor. And then we've had kids come back and say, hey, could I do a job shadow for half of a day? And they'll sit next to somebody who's doing an engineering job or something like that. And then over time, that's how you build that stair step. And so it's like this ecosystem where it all interacts with each other. And then they knew they had a great experience here, and so they'll either want to stay here, want to pursue an opportunity, or if it doesn't need a college degree, understand right out, you don't need to go to college to stay right here and have a really good job, right? So, I mean, that's, I know, blasphemy when you got a, Rocky Mountain College and MSUB right here in town, but it's true, right? You gotta have those conversations to make sure that people can get in and get those things done. So it all works together. So thank you for that question.
Well, our kids are already dreaming of being a fireman or,
Yeah.
a rock star, whatever it is, at second, 2, 3 years old. Why aren't we giving them, like, my husband is a machinist, so he makes the coolest video game you've ever seen, and not a single one ever plays with them, but he touches everyone's lives in some way every day, with whatever, anything that he makes. And so for our kids to be able to see those types of careers, and creating something that is as sexy as video games, why aren't we doing it younger? And so I'm all, sign me up.
Sounds good. STEMYellowstone.org, or get a hold of Marcel, and we'll get in touch and Congratulations, you're signed up for being our next.
I'm working with my husband.
Yeah, both of you. Two are better than one.
I guess we can do some final thoughts. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Any parting words to?
Well, I know this is about sparking, with the spark of your workforce, and Marcel teed us up to say, hey, what's one takeaway you want to make sure that you share? And I would really say to partner, to collaborate. We are no longer in competition with each other in this community. We're in competition as a community with other communities. And so, gosh, think about how you can share workforce. If we, St. John's United, we don't have all the careers in healthcare. We have some. So could we partner with the hospital to create this full career pathway where we might have this employee for 3 to 4 years, and then they go off and they're at SCL Health or they're at Billings Clinic. And I think that's going to be a way to think about workforce development differently. But if we could keep an employee for a guaranteed 3 years, but then they know that they're going to progress somewhere. If they progress within our organization, awesome. But if we don't have the opportunities, let's partner with somebody who does. And that keeps them in our community. So how can we think as we are this own organization, and how can we partner together to do things like childcare, to have transportation for work, so that we can we can do retention as a community. That's what I would say.
Thanks, Karen.
Yep.
I don't know how to follow that. I agree with everything she said. I think, just whatever you've done really well, just think about how you can do it differently. I think for me, it was always what we've always done, and this is how we've always done it, and it's worked until it didn't work anymore. And so you just really have to have your mind open. No idea is a dumb idea, and no matter how big and outstretched it feels like it is, how do you make it work? And I think just changing your mindset is a huge thing that you're going to have to do whether you like it or not. So embrace it. And hopefully it works out, and if it doesn't, try something new.
Thanks, Marcel, Carly, for making this happen. I think this is a really important sort of thing. Thanks to Yolawnda and everybody here. I think the big three for me is just, model how you want to behave, connect, and care. I mean, that is true in the business environment and how we work as a community to really move forward. And if you do all that sort of thing, other things will all of a sudden start taking care of it. Public safety concerns, all these other sort of things will just start naturally falling, be less difficult to maneuver through.
I feel like the two words that I kept coming back to were communication and collaboration. Obviously, communication is a huge part of our jobs, like just our individual jobs, but as a whole, it's really important. And also collaborating. I agree with what Karen said. It used to be, and I always get this question, like, why are people leaving your company? Like, what? Do you have a lot of turnover? And I'm like, as long as I can set people up for success and they leave to go do something great, that's not a loss. That is a gain. And so really switching the mindset from, gosh, this must be awful if we have turnover, to, while we have Bob for 2 years, let's make Bob the best employee. And if he decides to go, we've got a great relationship with him. He's going to go tell everybody the great relationship that he has with Turley. And maybe he'll come back, or maybe he'll send 5 of his buddies to come work for us. And so I think it's just being positive about the cards that we have instead of being upset about maybe turnover or shortage in employees. Let's use it, and let's shift how we're thinking about it and make it positive.
Thank you. I think my final thoughts were we should be kind, and we should give each other grace and ourselves grace, because we tend to not do that. And I think the more we do that, the better we feel about ourselves, our work environment. It's just healthy. So thank you.